I've been umming and ahhing what to do about these seat bases. They're okay, but they are pretty rusty. Try going over here with a wire wheel, but there's so many awkward little places that I think you'd be there all day. If you just took your chair to a trimmer, I doubt very much they'd take the time and trouble to get all of this rust off. It's not something you'll ever see because it'll be covered by the seat covers, but I just cannot bring myself to put new seat covers over a rusty base. So I'm going to attempt to de-rust this. Start off just snipping all of these rusty metal, most of them rusted through anyway, metal rings, and then this should in theory just lift off, in theory. If you are planning on doing this and taking this mohair off, my advice would be to make a careful note of how it's actually attached on. So for example, there are two metal rings or hoops, whatever those are called, here and here on the 1, 2, 3, 4th loop up. There's another two here, and then that's about it on the lower one. It may be the case that some of these hoops have actually just rusted away, and then along the top here or along this big cushion, count how many things there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 of those. I know I sound like a worn out record sometimes, but if you are planning on doing this, either because you want to change your mohair cushions, which I believe you can still get, or just because you want to de-rust the base like this, just do it slowly and carefully. What you don't want to do is rip this matting if you are planning on using it again. I really want to get involved in taking that coconut matting off, but I'm glad I did, because this is what the state of the staples or wire loops is like that I'm taking out. There's hardly anything left of them. Once you've got all those staples out, this should just lift off like so. What we'll do is we'll make sure we get rid of any residual rust in here. Now obviously, if money was no object, the simple thing to do would be to go out and buy another cushion, but we're not going to do that because we are restoring an entire car, and in our particular case money is an object, so we're just going to clean this up and reuse it to the best of our ability. If this was completely knackered and falling to pieces, I would definitely just go out and get a new one. So we're going to put this in a rust bath, but before we do, we're going to just go over it with a wire wheel, get off all of this loose rust. It will really speed up the process. If you want to de-rust these seat bases and you haven't got one huge great plastic box, you can always do it in several stages, just rotating this around each time. We are going to attempt to make a rust bath big enough to de-rust the entire seat bases from our Mercedes 107 SL. It's going to need to be wide enough to take the seat like that and long enough to take these. So we've gone along to Asda, our local cheap and cheerful supermarket. We bought two of these, £6 each, and my plan is to cut the sides off and then glue the two of them together. This is actually quite brittle plastic, and I know from experience from trying to cut perspex with things like a jigsaw, etc., that you do not get a very a good cut. So I'm actually going to try cutting this with an angle grinder using a very thin metal cutting disc and see if we can just cut along this edge and just cut that side off without everything shattering and splintering. Well, an angle grinder cuts through that pretty easily. It kind of melts its way through, so you're going to make sure you're not wearing something that you don't mind getting dirty, and also make sure you wear eye goggles and a mask as well. We're probably going to have to go over that with a sander to try and sand off all those rough edges. Both the edges off these boxes. The plan is to glue them together, clamp them, and hopefully that'll give us a watertight box. Just going to very lightly rough up the edges that we're gluing with a flat wheel, and that should aid the gluing process. Try gluing these two halves of plastic container together using this OB1. This is what we use to glue the runners on the metal glass. It worked really well. I imagine there are too many people out there who are going to attempt the same thing, but if you do, the way forward is to get a series of neodymium magnets, so you can basically clamp the two things together, and that will aid the gluing process. Sitting outside for a couple of days, we're just taking all the magnets off. Those are 50 kilogram pull magnets. You're going to make sure you don't put them anywhere near each other, otherwise they will snap together with some incredible force. And similarly, when we pick that up, we've got to make sure that the magnets don't jump towards each other. Let's do that really like that. Using the OB1 and a series of magnets, we still had 1 or 2 leaks, so what I've done is just put a fiberglass strip across there with some resin on it to see if that will seal it. Now, I was just going to put the seat base straight in there and start the de-rusting process, but just to be doubly sure that when I put all of the weight of that rust solution in there, it's not all going to leak out, I'm also giving it a coat of Acrupol, which is kind of fiberglass paint, and that will waterproof everything definitely. This stuff is amazing stuff. You use this for roofing to seal out damp, etc. But just a layer of that on there as well. We'll leave that to dry for a couple of days. We're not in a massive rush to do this, but what I don't want to do is spend 10-20 pounds on rust solution and then see it all leak out. This space has been sitting in the rust remover for several days. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination because we're having to do this outside and it's really cold, and this doesn't work as well when it's cold, but I can say it's an awful lot better than it was. What we're going to do is just take all of this to shiny bare metal and spray it with rust encapsulator, and then go over it with the Eastwood Chassis Black. It's probably the most awkward shape I've ever tried to paint. We've got one coat on there, but it's really difficult to paint. Just wondering if the other one, I might see if we can get that sandblasted and powder coated. It'll be a lot more expensive. Well, I don't know, I suppose it depends how much paint we get through, but it's taken such a long time to do that, and it's such an awkward shape. I struggled to get a leak-free container, and in the end what I did was just lived with the leaks, put a bucket underneath there, and then just used the bucket to fill up the container. It's only a very small leak. And then for the next one, we're going to use a little camping stove, and we're going to scoop this out and heat the water on the camping stove, not the water, the rust solution on the camping stove, and keep recycling it, because the warmer it is, the better it works. The other seat base took an awful long time to de-rust, so next time around we've learnt a few things and hopefully it'll be a bit quicker. The seat back is in much better condition than the seat base, so we're just going to go over this with a Dremel tool, get rid of this loose rust, and then just coat that with some Eastwood rusting caps. So we're not going to bother taking the cushion off in this particular case. As I say, this seat is not in too bad condition. We'll just leave these in the shed to dry overnight, and then come back tomorrow, paint with rust with the Extreme Chassis Black, and then fit the seat covers. We've finally finished de-rusting this seat base and seat back. It's taken an awful long time to de-rust it, to undercoat it and paint it properly. We've used the Eastwood Rust Encapsulator as an undercoat, and then the Extreme Chassis Black as a top coat. It took such a long time because this is such an awkward shape to get in here. It takes several coats and days for things to dry, etc. Every single bit of this seat has been restored. For the silver bits like that, we've used the MRO chrome galvanized coating. For the seat bases themselves, we've undercoated it with Eastwood Rust Encapsulator and then top coated it with the Extreme Chassis Black. Everything has come out really nicely. We're just going to let this dry in a warm house for an extra day because it's so cold outside. I want this paint to fully cure before I put the seat covers on. I'm going to finish the video here. In the next video, we're going to be reattaching the coconut matting to the seat base. We need some special wire and pliers to do that. We're also going to be retrimming these seats. Now, a very interesting thing happened. Anyone who follows this channel will know that we had a bit of a dilemma when it came to seat covers. Well, just arrived in the post from America is another set of seat covers from this company, L Seat. They sent us a replacement set, and I'll be intrigued to know if they fit any better than the last ones. I've mentioned these guys before, Built Hammer. This is what we're using to de-rust those seat bases. We've been using this extensively over the last few years, and it is an excellent product, works really well. We have used many other products, things like Evaporust also work fantastically well, but it's considerably more expensive. This comes in crystalline form, so you basically put 1 cup of crystals to 19 cups of hot water. So when you buy a 5 kilogram jerry can like we did, you're actually ending up with about 100 litres of rust remover for just over £50, and that works out really well. And certainly in the old Mercedes that we're dealing with, we get through quite a bit of this stuff. The other thing I'd mention about this is I had considered sandblasting the other seat base because it's so time consuming de-rusting such an awkward shape. But in actual fact, there's a lot of thin metal and quite rusty metal on those old seat bases. And what you don't want to do is end up damaging it. The force of actually sandblasting some thin sheet metal, especially when it's rusted, can deform metal. And we don't want that. And we don't want to unnecessarily remove any sort of metal that's already pretty thin. So this stuff in that context works really, really well, although it's not cheap. We get all our Eastwood products from these guys here. Moss, there happens to be a shop in Bristol, but they've got the whole range, or pretty good range of the Eastwood products, the rust encapsulated, the extreme chassis black, the MRO, chrome galvanizing, all that stuff we get from these guys. They work out a few pounds cheaper per can compared to other outlets like Frost. Obviously, if you live in America, buying Eastwood products is substantially cheaper.